Gold and silver is your bridge to hold your purchasing power intact to get you to the other side with that purchasing power intact. And dare I say it, if you have the ability to do it, you will even be in a much better position because there are opportunities that present all along the way. And we at Zang Enterprises and any good company like ours will convert this into whatever that local currency happens to be, whether it's digital or what have you. And it's all about recognizing those patterns so that you know when to shift from this into that.
I say bull market because I think we're still very much at the early stages of that. Obviously on the industrial side, it's a possibility that the demand will slide a little bit at the higher prices, but that's counteracted by the investor demand, which now wants to buy silver. Now the Silver Institute is forecasting that investors will buy 200 million ounces of silver in investment gold this year.
I don't think the Fed, if we're on a gold standard, the Fed is not necessary. The Fed's job is to regulate the rate and speed of inflation. Mm-hmm. And in the U.S., CBDCs have become a dirty word, right? So instead, President Trump recently signed into law the Genius Act and introduced and legalized stablecoins. Now, the stablecoins are really about, I see not much difference between CBDCs and stablecoins. The difference is do you want the Fed to be regulating you or do you want Amazon to be regulating you? Right. Neither one of them have your best interest at heart. But the stablecoin, just like I showed you in this example, right? And by the way, I have this $20 bill was printed in 1969. So we were still at least quasi on the gold standard. This one was printed in 2017. How different do they look?
Yeah, very different.
Right? So, the way they do it is to make you think that nothing has changed when in reality everything has changed. I think that the stable coins have been introduced to usher in the hyperinflation that they need to repay the unpayable debt that governments have incurred, because they have to hyperinflate that away. They must do that. I kept questioning over all these years, what is going to justify creating the new money? Mm-hmm. And everything that I had read from the global central banks and the BIZ and all the World Bank and all these guys was either debt or purchases. Now, with the legalization of the stable coins, my question has been answered, and it's both. So there's a lot of problems that I see with stable coins, but like Amazon is going to, and you may have already seen this. I've already begun to see this.
The modern monetary system depends on ever-expanding debt. Governments have accumulated obligations so large they can never be repaid conventionally. Historically, when nations enter this stage, they resolve it through inflation, often extreme. With stablecoins now part of U.S. financial law, a new justification for money creation has emerged. Digital assets and mounting debt together enable unprecedented issuance. The fear among critics is clear. These tools could usher in the manufactured hyperinflation needed to dissolve unsustainable liabilities. As old dollars lose value, new forms of currency are being positioned to replace them, accelerating the transition to a reset of the global monetary order,
where they're going to try and get you in their ecosystem. So Amazon will have its own stable coin, Walmart, yep. A city can have it, a state can have it, a country can have it. It doesn't all have to be backed by dollars. But since debt is what currently justifies the money creation, and this debt is unpayable, they have to hyperinflate away that debt, meaning that they have to destroy whatever else little bit of purchasing power is left in this stuff, so that they repay that debt with, in the U.S., dollars that have zero value. That is, by the way, part of the strategy that we execute at Zang Enterprises if you have fixed rate debt. However, that's not good for you if everything you have can only be converted back into this. I have here in my possession somewhere a $10 trillion Zimbabwe note, which means I am a trillionaire. Here it is. A $10 trillion Zimbabwe note, right? I'm a trillionaire in Zimbabwe. Do you know what I can buy with this 10 trillion Zimbabwe dollars?
I have no idea, but I'm guessing not a lot.
Zero. Absolutely nothing, right? But what they knew, and they talked about this in creating the system, is that people get blinded by numbers. They marry the numbers. Mm-hmm. So a great example of that would be, I bought my first house in like 1978, and I paid $59,000 for that house. It was a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 1,800 square foot house.
History shows that people become attached to nominal figures, whether it's a house price, a salary, or a $1 trillion banknote. Yet numbers alone don't reflect value. A Zimbabwean note labeled $10 trillion can't buy anything because its purchasing power vanished. The same pattern appears in U.S. housing. Prices rise not because homes improve, but because interest rates fall and money weakens. Lower rates allow larger debts, pushing prices higher while disguising the underlying devaluation of the currency. Over 4,800 documented fiat failures demonstrate that every paper money system follows a predictable life cycle, and America's appears dangerously late in that timeline.
Which today would go for something like, I don't know, maybe 500,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
It's the same house, but I also paid 12.75% interest on that mortgage. Mm-hmm. If you look at a chart on the Federal Reserve Education Department, the FRED, I encourage everybody to go in and just put whatever you want in the search bar and see what comes up. But you can look at, as they pushed the interest rates down so that more debt could be afforded, the price of the house went up. Mm-hmm. Because the lower the interest that you pay, the higher the debt service that you can accomplish.
Right.
But that's not a good thing at all, because it really is an indication of the loss of value of this. Mm-hmm. And there are over 4,800 examples of it. So you can look at it and see the pattern of a life cycle. And I could tell you without any doubt at all in my mind that we are at the end of this experiment. And what people need to understand is that when one system dies, another one is born. And physical gold and silver is your bridge to hold your purchasing power intact to get you to the other side with that purchasing power intact. And dare I say it, if you have the ability to do it, you will even be in a much better position, because there are opportunities that present all along the way. And we at Zang Enterprises and you know, any good company like ours will convert this into whatever that local currency happens to be, whether it's digital or what have you. And it's all about recognizing those patterns so that you know when to shift from this into that.
When financial systems unravel, a new one inevitably replaces it. During these transitions, physical gold and silver serve as the bridge that preserves purchasing power. Unlike digital currencies or hyperinflated cash, precious metals remain independent of governments and corporations. As the world experiments with digital money, the role of tangible assets grows even more important. Silver demand, both industrial and investment-driven, continues to surge. If global investors attempt to acquire even a single ounce each, the available supply would fall dramatically short. With mining capacity relatively fixed, shortages can only be resolved through higher prices, reinforcing silver's role as a crisis-era asset.
I say bull market because I think we're still very much at the early stages of that. Obviously on the industrial side, it's a possibility that the demand will slide a little bit at the higher prices, but that's counteracted by the investor demand, which now wants to buy silver. Now, the Silver Institute is forecasting that investors will buy 200 million ounces of silver in investment gold this year. When you divide that number out by the population of the planet, you'll find that's one person in 45 or something like that can have 1 ounce. Now, I know half the world probably can't afford anything in silver, but even so, if you think about it, if you have 1 ounce of silver alone, you're already ahead of the other 46 who won't be able to have it because there just isn't enough. If that 200 million ounces figure, that estimate going into investment demand is correct. Now, if that figure turns out to be 400 million ounces, because actually there's more than one person of 47 wants to buy an ounce, or that 1 in 47 persons wants to buy 2 ounces, well, where's it going to come from? The mined output is relatively inelastic, so the only place that extra silver can come from is recycled silver. And the only way you get recycled silver is to have a higher price than yesterday.
Beyond precious metals, the world is entering a multi-decade competition for industrial resources. Copper sits at the center of electrification. Power lines, EVs, data centers, and renewable infrastructure all require massive quantities. Analysts warn that new copper mines take years to develop, setting the stage for potential structural shortages. Uranium, too, is regaining prominence as nations pursue nuclear power to stabilize grids overwhelmed by digital demand. Although mining stocks often appear overpriced during hype cycles, long-term fundamentals remain strong. For investors, gradual accumulation, not speculation, may offer better positioning as global infrastructure shifts into a more energy-intensive era.
I haven't done a detailed study on copper yet, but everything I'm hearing from people who have done so says that the copper demand from everything from electrification of cars to data centers and all kinds of other things, the electrification of the world, in fact, is set to be higher in the future than it is at the moment. And it does take a long time to bring on stream new copper supplies. So if what I'm hearing is right, I think I'd be relatively bullish on the long term for the copper, but it's not really in much of a bull market yet. And I think that might just be indicative of the slowing economy, because copper will be much more prone to the ups and downs of the economy. So where I'm sitting on copper is I'm thinking I should start to buy copper miners. I haven't started yet. And I think the way to do it is slowly and gradually over the next 6, 9, 12 months. I don't think there's an urge to rush in, because obviously we do go into a recession. If we go into a recession, it won't be good for commodity companies in general, I think. So, I'm not going to go all in, even if I do start buying. But I think buying gradually will give me a range of prices. Maybe some will be higher than now, some lower. I don't mind, but at least I won't be buying everything at the top of the market. A couple of years ago, I did a study on the uranium demand is going to go up. A couple of years ago, I did a study of the uranium companies I could find at that time, and I basically turned away in disgust because they were all massively overpriced, in my opinion. So I didn't. Uranium itself, if you know how to store it, probably you're onto a good thing. But getting the shares of the mining companies didn't seem like a good idea a couple of years ago. Maybe I've been proved wrong. I haven't checked the prices, but I haven't gone back to look at them either. But I suspect they haven't got cheaper.
For young investors, conviction can be powerful. Risk is lowest when time is abundant, and bold bets, though risky, can teach invaluable lessons. One timeless approach is designing a portfolio based on age. Subtract 20, and the result is the number of investments you should hold. Fewer for the young, more for the old. Equally important, avoid obsessively monitoring investments. Constant checking amplifies emotional decisions, buying high and selling low. True long-term strategy comes from investing, stepping back, and letting time do the work. Diversification and patience protect wealth, especially in an era of shifting currencies and evolving financial systems.
I wish I knew when I was 18 what I know now. And the number one thing I would say to a young person is, if you have a strong conviction and you're young, 20, 21, 22, there's no harm in going all in on your strong conviction. You might lose it all, but it's a great test to see if your conviction is right. And the number of investments you should own, and I tell young people this now, is take your age, deduct the number 20, and that's how many investments you should own. So if you're 21, you're fine owning one investment, all in. If you're 22, now you should have two. If you're 60, you should have 40 investments, because the older you get, the less time you have ahead of you to recover things, and therefore you need to be much more diversified, so that if one of your conviction bets goes wrong, you still have all the others. So, by the time you get to my age, and you should have I'm 68, you should have a minimum of 48 investments, minimum. That doesn't mean say you can't have 100. And some people say, but Clive, that's crazy. How could you monitor 48, let alone 100? Well, I can answer that. Provided that you're convinced of the merits of the investment you're making at the time you make it, that's the last time you should look at it for a very long time. Because if you monitor the investment, any investment, you're going to, in the course of a year, see good news, bad news, good news, bad news, good news, bad news. Everything has good news and bad news, depends on the day of the week. You don't know what's coming, but there's going to be good and bad news. And the trouble with human nature is, if you're watching something, you think you're watching it for a reason. You're thinking, so you're watching it so you can get out when there's bad news and get in when there's good news. So what does that cause you to do? It causes you to sell on bad days and buy on good days. So you end up going in, out, but you're non-stop selling low and buying high, selling low, buying high, the wrong way around. That's why I say, if it's good enough to buy on day one, forget it. Don't look at it again. Now, the only way you can not look at it again is if you have a lot of investments. If you have too few, you're forced to look at it. If your only investment is Bitcoin, for example, you're going to be watching the price every 5 minutes on your telephone. Oh, it went up. Oh, it went down. Oh, it went up. And you're getting that thrill. And then oh my God, it's gone below 100,000. I better sell. Oh my God, it's gone to 130. It must be a buy. And you're reacting like that. Whereas if you've got so many investments, you can't look at them. You're no longer driven by those huge swings in and out. So I say there's absolutely no harm in having more investments than you can watch. And in fact, it's a good thing.